Parliamentary rugby team at its great successes. What a wonderful thing that was, winning the Parliamentary World Cup again. Thank you.
Who managed that, Mr Speaker?
Oh, Phil Twyford.
Mr Speaker, last Friday was an utter fiasco. All the years of planning, the hundreds of photo opportunities, hundreds of press releases, all of the assurances we had from the Minister of the Rugby World Cup, from the Prime Minister, from the Minister of Transport, they all came to nothing. 2,000 rugby fans denied an opportunity to go to the opening ceremony and the game at Eden Park. We had people who were crushed in railway carriages for hours, people passing out in railway carriages from lack of air. We had people on Quay Street crushed in the crowd. And that, sir, is an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment to New Zealanders and it's an embarrassment for New Zealanders. I want to talk about accountability, because what we've seen in the last few days from this government is an absence of accountability. We saw Murray McCulley on the weekend denying that there was any problem, saying, oh, look, you've got to look at this in the context of a normal Friday and Saturday night. He was playing down the problems. He was denying that there had been any serious breakdown of systems. We've seen John Key pointing the finger at everyone but the government. Len Brown's to blame, Auckland Transport's to blame. He even tried to point the finger at the people who had pressed the emergency stop button in the railway carriages, because in certain instances they had been holed up in those carriages, stationary on the tracks for hours on end. It's a complete failure of ministerial oversight, Mr Speaker. And what happens now? We see Murray McCulley, like my colleague David Shearer says declaring martial law over the Auckland waterfront, behaving like some tin pot general, as David Shearer said. So a few days before, Murray McCulley's saying there's no problem. A few days later, he's declaring and using the emergency powers in the Rugby World Cup legislation to take control of the Auckland waterfront. Well, what changed, sir? It's not a problem on Saturday. On Tuesday, suddenly it's a massive problem and Murray McCulley has to use the emergency powers. I'll tell you what changed, sir. This became a political liability for the national government. They panicked. They hit the panic button because they could see what a disaster Friday night was for them, and that inevitably the public will blame the national government. So who's in charge here? We've got a notorious micromanager, the Minister, the Honourable Murray McCulley. We find today he even selected the colour of the jackets that the volunteers are wearing at the Rugby World Cup. What I want to know, sir, is if the All Blacks don't play well in the next game, will Murray McCulley insist on choosing the next team? What we saw yesterday was a hatchet job on Auckland Council and on the Auckland Mayor, Len Brown. We know that from the beginning of the week, government officials and council officials were working closely together on a plan to address the inadequacies of crowd management and public transport that took place on Friday night. They were working together, they had a plan, it was going to be unveiled. What does the Minister do? He unilaterally briefs journalists on his plan to invoke the emergency powers in the Rugby World Cup legislation. He doesn't even have the decency to pick up the phone and tell Len Brown what he's doing. I think that's a disgrace, sir. It's a political stunt, and everything that we've seen from the Minister, Murray McCulley, in the last 24 hours has all been about trying to sheet blame home to somebody else. And in this case, sir, Murray McCulley's sacrificial lamb is the Auckland Council and Len Brown. This, sir, is a new low in this government's relations with Auckland. It's not only an admission that their planning and preparation over the last few years has been a complete failure, but it's a demonstration, sir, and a confession that this government cannot work constructively with Auckland. And we saw it throughout the Auckland Super City reform process. We saw it with Murray McCulley abusing the Auckland Regional Council over Queen's Wharf. The three ministers who are responsible for this government's handling of the Rugby World Cup, the Prime Minister John Key, the Transport Minister Stephen Joyce and the Rugby World Cup Minister Murray McCulley, they're all Auckland MPs, and yet their relationship with Auckland is completely dysfunctional. It ranges from hand-wringing to lecturing to abuse, and now they've used emergency powers to take control of the Auckland waterfront. Why? Because this government always knows best. Stephen Joyce insisted, against the advice of the mayors of Auckland and public opinion, insisted on setting up Auckland Transport under a corporate model. He insisted, sir, on appointing the chair and the...
Time's expired.
Okay, thank you.
So the time for this debate has now expired. Call Government Order of the Day number 1.